Well, big talking point in tech at the moment is TikTok. The Australian government came out with a position recently saying that they were going to look at the TikTok service as part of a Senate inquiry into social media and the data that's being harvested by these services. This is a fairly big rabbit hole to go down. The TikTok service, social media services. I think TikTok's getting a lot of attention, especially because it's so popular with the younger members of the community. To have a chat about the app, the data that's generated, the service in general, I thought we'd talk with app expert and friend of the show, Mike Boyd. Mike, TikTok, the app, this service. You know a lot about these guys.
Look, it's a really interesting platform, Charlie, and it's come a long way since it merged with what was formerly Musically a couple of years ago.
And let's look at the service to begin with. How big is it? How popular is it? Give me some information around that.
All right, so look, recent statistics have TikTok's monthly active users, which is the big benchmark that all apps use, at about 800 million a month.
Wow.
And I mean the app itself was downloaded 700 million times in 2019. Here in Australia, slightly smaller numbers, of course, but it's anywhere between 1.6 to 1.7 million users in Australia at the moment, which is not insignificant. And I think the frequency of its usage is probably the thing that raises most eyebrows.
This is a social media platform. Instagram is a social media platform. Facebook is a platform. What's the reason that TikTok is getting so much attention versus the other ones that are out there? Aren't they much the same?
Look, they're all much the same. You're right. I mean, they're all about trying to get your attention and get your attention in such a way that you're going back to these apps to look at the content, and then the content, and the more content you consume, the more content you look at, then the more data and information that they build up about you. And then from that point of view, which like all of these platforms, it's all about the advertising dollar that then can flow back through those platforms based on the fact that I know that, this user might be a 30-year-old male who's into, he's a tradie, therefore he's into clothing, or he might be into utes, versus a 15-year-old girl who might be into dancing or into rowing or whatever it might be. So they're all very unique in that, very similar in that regard. But what's interesting is when you look at the way that people use them, particularly teenage kids, the distinction between what they use TikTok for, what they use Instagram for, and what they're using Snapchat for is really interesting.
Is it the fact that, let's be realistic, TikTok is being used by a large number and an ever-growing number of kids who are under the approved age of 13 to actually use the service? It seems to be that is the age group that's really pulled towards using TikTok.
Yeah, and like all good app developers, ByteDance, which is the company that creates TikTok, and a bunch of other apps, they are extremely good at building a very, very easy to use, intuitive interface. So you can just load up TikTok. You watch one video, you swipe up to the next one, you swipe up to the next one. It's very, very simple. As opposed to a platform like Snapchat, which has got all sorts of inherent quirks in it that you understand the more you use it. So the simplicity of its use means that it's very attractive to kids of all ages, and I agree that really is where the area of concern is for the government.
When I look at the privacy requests that is being made on the TikTok app, when you're installing it, it seems to be to me that there's a lot more information that the app is requesting than other social media platforms that are being installed onto your device too. Is that correct?
Look, yes, TikTok probably is at the really outer end of the envelope, so to speak, of what it actually requests. I mean, of course, you have most apps like a Facebook or an Instagram and so forth. They want access to your to your gallery, so you can upload photos and videos. They want access to your camera. They might want access to your location because they want to serve up content and or advertising relative to where you are. But it's where you then get into the other, not necessarily privacy aspects, but the way that the apps then can control what your device is doing. So, for instance, when you install TikTok on your device, it can prevent the phone from sleeping. It can also, on an Android device, it has full read-write access if you have an SD card inserted into your Android device. It can read the home screen settings. So there's lots of things that it learns about you and your device, which I think is certainly the situation that it's got itself into, and getting its being looked at very closely by regulators.
But why does it need all that? I mean, if Facebook doesn't need that level of access, then why is TikTok needing that? And is that sort of the bit that's getting their hand caught in the mousetrap, so to speak? The fact that they've actually requested all of these access points or these authorizations. The things are being loaded onto handsets of kids, yet the kids don't understand the privacy implications of all of this. The parents who are obviously authorizing this don't seem to understand it or care about it. Yet in their hand, there's a device that can read and write to the SD card or understand so much more about what the handset is doing than just the operation of the app itself.
That's right, and I think it is. It's that there's two sides to this in terms of it's the privacy aspects directly related to the user, and then it's the control over the device as we talked about. And then I think that really where it gets very serious is then that take all of that information, and then the question mark around where is that data going? Is that data being stored? In mainland China? Is it accessible by the Chinese government? Now, TikTok have come out and said that their data is stored in servers in the US and in Singapore, and that the Chinese government has no access to it. Now, that's a really interesting sort of response and not unexpected, until you then look at the fact that the Indian government and India, in TikTok's world, India is a third of their user base. The Indian government last week banned TikTok and a bunch of other apps as well because of serious concerns over privacy issues to citizens.
Can you ban an app though? I mean, what does that mean? You can't use an app. Okay, well, so what? I mean, if the federal government in Australia came out and said, "Oh, you can't use this app," what are they going to do? Block the access to it at the hub point into Australia of the internet? Well, how do you do it?
Well, look. Essentially, yeah, they'll block it. They'll either make it illegal for it. So first things first, they'll ban its download on the app stores, and that's pretty easy to do. And most of these apps now, instead of asking you to sign up and put in your first name and surname and date of birth and email address and whatever else, they usually start off by simply getting your phone number. So essentially what they would do is they would not allow any, and this is obviously more geared towards new users, they wouldn't allow a phone number that starts with +61, which is the Australian country code, to be put into the app. So we've removed it from the app stores. We don't allow Australian phone numbers. And then what they would do is then they would block the IP addresses for the servers that actually provide all the content into the app itself. So they essentially cut off the supply lines of data to the apps.
And then I guess it's up to the 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds to go and find a way around it if they can. The final question I wanted to ask you about this is, if TikTok is so bad, why is it being used so much by young kids, Mike? Do you think that the parents don't know, don't care, or just give in to the lobbying for them and their kids as to why they should be able to access the service?
Look, Charlie, I think it's a lot of those things. I mean, I've got a 17-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, and my wife and I have gone through all of this over the last few years. There is a lot of peer pressure I remember, our son, I think it was, when he turned sort of 13, so look, I want to get Instagram, and it was, it was almost that sort of modern day rite of passage, right? I've turned 13 now, I can actually have Instagram now. So I think there's a lot of peer pressure. I think also there is a lot of complacency with parents. I think, there's probably a lot of parents out there that just don't know what they don't know. And I know that's sort of a harsh way to look at it, but there really does need to be a lot more education, I believe, coming through schools, but also coming through other channels for parents to say, look, this is what you really need to know. You don't need to know the ins and outs of how it works, but you really do need to know what the risks are here of for your child and what they might be exposed to on these platforms, and what those issues could lead to. And I also think that to a certain degree, there's also the app manufacturers themselves, the app builders and designers themselves, that there needs to be a bit more transparency around what they're doing with content and what they're doing with this data, and being held to account to say our data is stored in these either virtual locations or physical locations. So there is a high degree of confidence for governments and for parents to understand exactly what the challenges and risks might be.
Yeah, well, it looks like they've got a lot of work to do around confidence, especially with authorities, yes. No doubt with parents. But looks like the 12-year-olds of the community are totally fine with it, though. TikTok, we'll talk again about it. Mike Boyd, thank you for your time today. Great to have a good chat to you about this one. I hope we've answered everybody's questions and filled in a lot of the gaps about this service and what some of the nastiness of it could potentially be. We'll chat to you again soon. Appreciate your time.
Excellent, Charlie. Have a good day.